This is not a drill. Major fuel leak, fire room. And then they called, I believe they called general quarters for that. And we all went to our stations. And I remember thinking, oh man, this could get bad. Hi, folks. SC Closer. Friends call me Vic. This is another episode of Vic's Sea Stories and Tall Tales. Stories about my time in the United States Navy. I'm going to get a little more serious again and talk about something. Is there some things that actually kind of deserve to be said about an individual, but I wanted to explain some stuff too. I was an electrician, so I was in engineering department. In engineering department, we're in charge of the main propulsion plant. Okay, so we're the guys that are keeping the ship steaming. We're getting everybody else to go wherever we're going. We're getting you there. Okay. You got BTs. They work down in the fire room where the boilers were. So they're down there running the boilers, making the steam. This steam is going over to the engine room. The engine room has these big turbines that turn the gears and all the engines. So we had basically steam turbine engines, and they run all that. We're making the electricity on the ship. We're taking evaporators, and we're making fresh water from seawater. So we had a lot of other little things. We ran. We had the fire pumps. We had to keep the fire pumps going to keep the fire main up in case we had fires. Stuff like that. I was responsible for elevators and cranes and reefer units and just anything electrical. We worked on it. But we were also the firefighters on the ship. Matter of fact, if you're in an engineering rating before you make third class and have a rating, you wear red stripes and you're considered a fireman. Okay, and so we were all firemen, and we went to firefight schools. I went to 3 firefight schools while I was in the Navy, and we trained to fight fires all the time on the ship. Now, I don't know. I'm assuming they still train like they did, back when we were in, but we trained all the time. Okay, and we had times, and I'll tell you the stories about these times, but we had times when we had actual emergencies, and that training kicked in. And I was surprised at how we responded because when it was real, we responded a little better than we did in drills. Matter of fact, when it was real, we responded a lot better than we did in drills. But it was because we did it over and over and over and over again. But getting back to this, we trained all the time to fight a main space fire. A main space fire is a fire that happens in the main spaces, which would be either in the engine room or the fire room, okay? Those are dangerous fires. The most feared thing on a ship is fire. We train for this all the time. And that was our biggest fear as engineers, is a main space fire. Because a main space fire could get out of control very easily. A main space fire, a lot of your shipmates, a lot of your friends are likely to get killed. It's dangerous. It's very, very dangerous. Main space fire, it can sink the ship. So it was taken very, very seriously. And there were certain casualties that when they happened, it's like a prelude to a main space fire. One such casualty would be a major fuel leak. And I remember we were underway and they called it over to 1MC. This is not a drill. Major fuel leak, fire room. And then they called, I believe they called general quarters for that. And we all went to our stations. And I remember thinking, oh man, this could get bad. This could get bad. I think, this is at the time I was still in repair locker number 2. And Repair 5 was responsible for fighting the main space fires. But if there was a main space fire, Repair 2, we would have been there also. Repair 5 was the best trained repair locker on the ship. And, basically we would be there if, just to supplement them. And every engineer, if you were an engineer in the Navy at the time I was, you'll know exactly what I mean by this. We all prayed that the installed halon system would work. But in any event, they called a major fuel oil leak in the fire room, and we just knew what that meant. I was just waiting for them to call the fire. And we went their general quarters positions. I was up there, I think, in repair 2 at the time. We were waiting to see what happened. And it wasn't long, and they said that the fuel oil leak had been secured. And then it wasn't long after that, we left general quarters, and it was over with. And so, I had to go find out what happened, So I went right down there and I started talking to some of the BTs. And this is where I think, some recognition is deserved here. We had I believe it was a third class at the time. His name was BT3 Krupp. He was a nice guy. He's a good friend. Everybody liked him. And he was on watch down there in the fire room, and when the fuel oil leak started, and it was down below some stuff, and it was hard to get. There was a valve or something that was in an area it was hard to get to, and Krupp jumped down into the bilges, waded through the fuel oil, so he was in it. So if a fire would have started, he would have been burned to death. And he waded through that, and he got to the valve and he turned it off and he stopped the fuel oil leak. But Krupp was a hero, and I believe they gave him a NAM for that, which is a Navy Achievement Medal. But he did get a medal for that. And you never do know who's going to step up, but that's what you do for your shipmate.